Welcome back to West China Tea. Things have changed. I'm really excited to be here, Sohan. We've got lots of things that have happened in the past couple of months. Well, you've been growing. I brought Molly from WildGins, and we're going to talk about things that are dear to your heart, like the whole biology of plants and things like that. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, so this is going to be fun. A little bit about Molly. Exactly, you're a professor at the university here?
I am. I have a rather split but very fun personality. By day, I'm a biology professor down the street at UT, at the University of Texas in Austin.
Cool.
And hence my professorial kind of garb. It's daylight hours, so I'm wearing this. On the nights and weekends, I turn into a gin entrepreneur, which is really a nature-loving, juniper adventuring person. So I wanted to make sure that she was present, even though it's, on the clock daylight hours. Yes, so my side hustle is I go on a search or a hunt for the best of Texas junipers that are out there to make beautifully unique Texas gins.
Cool, that's amazing. My degree's in biology.
So we're gonna have lots to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. I studied marine biology at UC Santa Cruz. But the reason I was in China, when I moved to China, I was there working with an NGO, an environmental NGO, doing freshwater remediation stuff. So yeah, my whole deal in China was doing ecological stuff. So
well, we have a lot more in common than I realized because my training was as a marine biologist.
Wait, really?
I worked on the other side of that bay at Hopkins Marine Station,
Oh
part of
my
Stanford's Marine Biology Station
Wow.
in Pacific Grove.
And here we both are doing beverage stuff. That's the marine biology track. That's what happens apparently.
What kind of tea did you bring for us today?
Well, wild gins, so I figured we'd do wild teas since Molly takes the time to forage juniper, which we have abundantly here in central Texas. I picked out a wild tea. This is called Wild Sparrow, and it's a green tea. It is a purple green tea, and so when I say green tea, I'm talking about the style of processing, unoxidized tea. But when I say purple tea is not like a type of tea the way that green tea or white tea or oolong tea is. Purple is just the phenotype. Sometimes tea plants are purple. Very, very rarely, like 1 in 1,000 tea plants are purple. But when you harvest just those purple plants, then we call it purple tea. And you can process that into green tea or red tea or black tea or white tea or oolong tea, and it's just purple white tea, purple green tea. So this is a purple green tea. It's wild purple green tea. The guy who makes this, his name is Hung Yi. He's the last person I saw in China on this last trip. I just got back like less than a month ago. I was there for a month. And Hung Yi, I've known him for a long, long time, more than a decade. And he works exclusively with wild plants from Mabian, which is kind of rural Sichuan, the mountains of Sichuan. Tea is a mountain plant. And you can see the difference between this and it's a little bit much. Our pre-game green tea that we were drinking before we started, this has these flattened leaves. And so this is just the leaf bud of the tea plant. And that's kind of the most premium part of the tea plant is the early spring growth. And you can see they've been flattened into what's called a sparrow's tongue shape. And this is one bud, one leaf. Yeah, Corey, if you want to get in on there and see these little leaves. And one bud, one leaf, meaning the leaf bud, the immature leaf bud, and then one mature leaf. And you can see, I'll go ahead and pick it up, you can actually see this one bud, one leaf situation going, and you can also see the purpleness of the plant. You see how this one's darker.
Yes.
That is a mature, semi-mature leaf. It's a young leaf, and it's gonna have that purple color, whereas the bud looks mostly white because it's covered with little trichomes, and that gives it its white appearance. And yes, it's very, very nice tea. Wild tea is considered superior, just like wild truffles. Well, I guess one of wild truffles, or like wild ginseng.
Right.
And the reason is that the Chinese perspective is that what makes a tea good and valuable is not how it tastes. It's the way it makes you feel. And that component, they don't think of that as being the drugs in the tea. They think of that as being the qi of the tea. Okay. This kind of immaterial, non-physical aspect
The
of the
energy
tea.
of
The
the
energy, exactly. And wild tea is superior because it's been soaking up all the wild chi, as opposed to a cultivated plant that has been being taken care of. These wild plants have to go through the hardship of living in the ecosystem, and so their chi is stronger. And so when you drink them, it's a superior tea.
Oh, our plants have so much in common. I can't wait to talk about it.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll get this started, and then let's hear about these junipers because I see them all over the place.
Well, the ones you see here in Austin, fortunately, are not in my gins. Okay. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, I'm a biology professor at UT, which makes me, by definition, pretty bio-geeky. Very proud to have that term. But nonetheless, it allowed me to go down a rabbit hole of determining or trying to understand how many different juniper species we have here in Texas. And it ends up, our state is more biodiverse when it comes to
It's okay.
juniper
it's my fault.
species than any other state in the United States. Texas has more juniper species than any other U.S. state.
Wow.
We have 8 different species. That is more than Western Europe.
Wow. I did not know. That's cool.
It's 8 times more than the UK has.
Wow. Suck it, UK.
Yeah, exactly. So
Texas.
I mean, they're wonderful. They put gin on. Well, they made gin famous. They did not.
Right.
They are not the originators of gin.
Oh, I thought they were.
No.
Oh.
The Dutch are.
Oh.
Yeah.
Geneva.
Genever, exactly.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
means juniper in Dutch.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was the kind of crazy times in Britain subsequent to that made gin famous, and they made such a strong association between the UK.
So Geneva or Genever, that's more of a precursor, and I believe it's a sweeter style?
It might be. I mean, I've only had a little of it when I've been over to Europe. I haven't had it in the United States. But nonetheless, Western Europe, there's essentially 2 species of juniper that predominate. One is called the common juniper. It's palatable. One's unpalatable. Guess what? People all use the common juniper because it's actually tastes good. And so pretty much 98, I'd say 99% of all gins in the entire universe that we know of.
The known universe.
Exactly. Features the common juniper. And here in Texas, we are this giant, beautiful state with 8 species. No one was exploring to find the best ones. So I took it upon myself to do that.
So how does the confusion over juniper come from? Because in Central Texas, every winter, we get something called cedar fever. And the pollen of the trees that gets into the air is quite an irritant. And for some reason, there seems to be this common consensus that they're not junipers, they're cedar.
Right. So there is a confusion, but the reality is that what we tend to call mountain cedar is a juniper. Its scientific name is Juniperus ashii, or the ash juniper. Okay. The reason why people sometimes have conflated the two is because both cedars and junipers are in the cypress family. And so people kind of just conflate the two of them. So anyhow, they are juniper. They are not in my gin. Okay, I want to make it really clear from the get-go. I have experimented with 5 to 6 of the 8 species in terms of making different gins. I have definitely settled on the best 2 for each of my, and I feature one of those 2 in each of my gins.
That's awesome. I love that because there's this, that's kind of very in line with like my whole deal, because tea culture, just like cedar and juniper, people are confused about tea from a botanical perspective. They think that tea is any plant steeped in hot water, but actually tea is a plant. It's okay, there we go.
Keep going.
Okay.
Keep it on you.
It's the name of the, it's a particular, just like tobacco is a plant or coffee is a plant, tea is Camellia sinensis. And the different types of tea, green tea and red tea and oolong tea and white tea, are all just different processes, whereas chrysanthemum tea or chamomile tea or hibiscus tea are not actually tea. Just like our cedars are not actually cedars. And you tend to, in the States, you tend to see, you go to a tea shop and they'll say like, we have 100 different teas, but really what they have is like coconut green tea and mango green tea and strawberry green tea, flavored teas. And there's no, the consideration of the plant and the varietal of the plant that's being used, the cultivar of the plant that's being used, is lost. And so I love seeing a gin where rather than we're adding, it's the same base thing and we're adding all these other botanicals in, which is fine, but I'm kind of a purist. Like I'm tacos, not burritos. And so I really like that the essential element, the juniper, there's actually this, botanical difference between the different junipers. I also think it's really cool that you're using our native Texas junipers.
Exactly. And you bring up a great point. There are over 1,000 gins in the world. And all the rest of the gins are diversifying on the other botanicals.
Exactly.
So to be a gin, there's kind of only a few parts of the definition. You start with a grain neutral spirit, which is essentially a vodka. And then you either infuse or redistill with botanicals, and that botanical suite has to have juniper as its dominant component. Otherwise, it's not a gin. It's simply called an infused vodka.
Right.
So everybody else is using the common juniper and then being like, oh, I'm going to add my favorite thing in the kitchen sink to make it different in the rest of the botanical wheelhouse. And we are Texifying the heart of what makes a gin a gin.
Love that.
Yes.
Love that.
So it's been super fun. I certainly, of course, tried the local variety, the one we just have been describing, the ash juniper. My master distiller, when I sent it to him, he's like, never send me this horrid juniper ever again. So I was dismayed for all of about 30 seconds when I realized, oh, this simply means I get to go to the mountains and find the good ones.
Okay.
So I went on, we're being pure, I love it. I went on a hunt and I started with the alligator juniper. Because if you find out that there's a juniper called the alligator juniper in Texas, it's your obvious first #1 target. So that's what I did. I'm first going to take a break though. And is this the wild tea?
This is the wild tea. This is wild sparrow. And again, it's called wild sparrow because the shape is called sparrow's tongue. When you have straightened flat tea leaves like that, you call it sparrow's tongue, and it's a wild tea. I'll give you a little smell of the leaves here too.
Wow.
This is my favorite tea in the tea house
This
right
is
now.
just
Yeah, this is
so
my favorite.
good.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you. Especially the last one we had, Tai Chow Mao Jen, is also a great tea,
Yes.
but you can really taste from one green tea to another, like the difference.
And the leaves are so
Exactly.
earthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is lovely. So yes, I went on a hunt for the alligator juniper. And it's kind of a funny story. Actually, it was my science, my day job, that kind of led me to finding the alligator juniper. Not to get off on too much of a tangent, but for part of my research, I've worked on camouflage for the Navy and worked on polarized camouflage. And that all began through some basic research with working with scarab beetles. And scarab beetles are one of the few organisms in the world to reflect circular polarized light. And I don't want to get into what that is, but it's very rare. And so I was working with my colleague on these scarab beetles, and he heard me talk about the alligator juniper, and he said, well, I know where the alligator juniper is. Our beetles live on those junipers out in West Texas. So you need to drive yourself out to Fort Davis. You need to talk to the librarian at the public library, and she'll get you going. So that's what I did. Super fun. Met with the librarian, Toy Fisher. She's amazing. And she said, oh yeah, I've got those all over my yard. And she gave me a map on how to find her yard because the Google Maps didn't work back in the mountains. And kind of the rest is history. But that's how it all began.
Wow. And the gin, when you're making it, there's a number of different ways that you can infuse gin. It's similar to doing tea. You can actually put it in a basket in the middle of the still, or you can put the botanicals in the liquid in the still and then boil that off.
Yes.
Or you could do both.
Yep.
So exactly what is your procedure?
And some
Yeah.
can even do the cheapest version and not even redistill.
Right, they just
which
flavor it
that's
like a
called
tea.
Bathtub
Yeah.
gin.
Yeah.
I don't recommend doing that. So we do the latter. So we infuse with the botanicals overnight with our GNS, our gray neutral spirit, in our base copper pot still. And the next day, we do a distillation. And so that then becomes our gin.
Okay, so steeped and then distilled.
Yes.
And then you're going to probably take those botanicals out of the liquid
Oh,
and
yes.
strain them off.
Yes,
before
we
you...
definitely
Yeah.
have to clean the still before we do anything else.
Oh, wait, so you're putting it in the
The pot of the still.
pot of the still, and then you're distilling it, but you're taking the berries out first.
So no, you keep them in during the distillation. The berries themselves are too heavy. They're not going to actually go up,
Sure.
become the vapor that comes up through the column portion of the still and then condenses down into the distillate. None of those, there's kind of actually a little filter anyway, so nothing physical like a berry or any part of a physical portion of a botanical will physically make it through. That's why you just have the condensed liquid on
But
the
the berries are getting heated?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And their volatiles, their beautiful essences and aromatic compounds are the ones that are going up through that second distillation process.
Cool.
Now that grain neutral spirit, you wouldn't want to put it in the still at a high proof. You probably have to bring that proof down before you put it into the still.
Oh, we don't want to give away too many of our secrets, do we? We start pretty high, and then it comes down. But yes, actually, but speaking of grain neutral spirit, a typical gin out of the UK is going to use a grain neutral spirit that's corn ethanol.
Okay.
And for some of those gins, sometimes you can actually taste that in the medicinal harshness that some people associate with gin. Our GNS is beautiful and smoother, and it's kind of very appropriate for this podcast because it's whiskey-esque. It's an 80% rye, 20% malted barley, grain neutral spirit, yes, base. And so it's a smoother, kind of rounder mouthfeel when we get to tasting our gins.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
In vodka, the rye spirit tends to have a little bit more spice on the neutral grain spirit as well. So I'm interested in trying this. You've got 3 glasses. Which one are you picking first?
Well, I was going to start with the one that features the Alligator Juniper, since I spoke of him. Actually, all berries, every juniper tree that I collect from is going to be female. So a lot of trees are hermaphroditic, so to speak. They've got both male and female parts. Junipers are dioecious, so you've got separate sexes of plants. And so all the trees that contain the berries are the female trees. So I talk about my trees in the feminine. I talk about my gins in different pronouns. My Wild Bark is my masculine gin.
Okay.
My Wild June is my feminine gin. We'll get to her in a bit, but we're going to start with Mr. Wild Bark.
Cool.
Just, I don't want to confuse everyone as I throw out these pronouns here and there.
Right.
So the Alligator Juniper is also known as the checker bark juniper because of the variegated trunk of the tree. The bark is really rough, like an alligator skin.
Cool.
And I had decided to call it Wild Bark to kind of play on the bark part of checker bark. And we put a wild canine to play on the double entendre of Wild Bark. The only wild canine we have in Texas is a coyote. I will not be offended if you call him a wolf. He's very handsome, but that is a coyote. And while I'm thinking of it, I want y'all to look on the inside.
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah.
He's winking at you. I don't know. Well, y'all will just have to kind of buy yourself a bottle
There
so
you
you can
go.
see it in person.
Yeah.
But that's my little special.
And I
effect.
see that the tree has a name.
Yes, thank you. So you're getting the clear picture of me that I love my trees. I name all my trees. These trees take 2 years to go through the full reproduction of creating berries. And so I've got odd year girls and even year girls, and I visit them. And ends up that we collect enough juniper berries per tree to do single distillation batches.
Cool.
So I decided to honor all these lovely ladies in our lives by putting the name of each tree's distillation batch on the side label. So we've collected, I have numerous numerous trees with names, and we have lots of different distillation runs out there. And so you can find your favorite tree if you so choose, and see how she varies through time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
They do this with tea. You'll get what they call single tree teas.
Nice.
So tea trees they just live forever. If nothing kills them, they live forever. And you've got like centuries old, up to like more than 1,000-year-old, they say.
Wow.
No one knows. There's no way to really know how old the tea tree is because you can't do dendrochronology on them because they're tropical plants.
Right.
But people estimate that there's some of these trees are more than 1,000 years old, and they can get very big.
Okay.
We think of tea trees as bushes. That's because people have bred them small and pruned them.
Okay.
Pruned them short to make them easy to pick. But the Yunnan tea trees, where tea is kind of indigenous to, do grow tall, and you have to climb up in them, and they're you have to build scaffolds in them to pick the leaves at the top.
That is amazing.
And some of them are big enough that you can make single tree batch teas. They're very, very expensive. We have one. We have one that we carry, and the name of that tree is Guanjing. So they also have names. This tree is about 800 years old. They estimate it's about 800 years old.
Wow.
And I've met this tree, and tea trees are monoecious, so they're an old tree, and those are the most premium sheng pu'ers. We'll drink a sheng pu'er next, but the most premium sheng pu'ers are the ones that are, there's this trend of the more restricted the sourcing is, the higher grade the tea is. So you've got whole region factory teas where they're just harvesting tea from the entire region from different farmers and processing it all together and blending it. And that's, this lower tier. And then you get like single mountain teas. This is just one mountain. You get the terroir of that mountain. Then you get single patch teas where it's just, for example, the duoyi patch, one particular patch at a particular elevation. And the plants in that area all have a similar character. They're related, they're experiencing the same conditions. And then the most refined being that single tree tea. And you have to get a really big tree to have enough to make a single tree batch. And you'll get maybe a couple kilos a year, a couple kilos of dry leaves a year.
Well, we have so many parallels. I'm so excited. I'm learning so much about tea. First of all, yes, so we are a single origin gin, and more or less the first in the world, certainly the first in the United States.
Hey.
Really excited, snap, 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 big time. And secondly, a similarity to what you just described in the tea world is that most people think of juniper as a shrub. Common juniper is a shrub. Mm-hmm. Our Texas junipers, of course, are bigger. Everything's bigger in Texas. The alligator juniper is the tallest, boldest, biggest of the 8 species of junipers in Texas. The alligator juniper can grow 50 to 60 feet tall.
Wow, all right.
Can be 40, 50 feet wide.
What?
And I can get so much more than a few kilos.
Wow.
I can get upward towards 40 to 50 pounds. We're in the U.S., I'm going to use pounds, of dried juniper berry. And she still has berries on her. Because I have not denuded her of all her berries. I would never do that to my trees. I just take a few, kind of thing. But yeah, it's pretty impressive. And with gin, I'm not using, people are like, how are you ever going to scale, right? I plan to be I'm going to put my goal out there. Mm-hmm. I plan to be the most dominant gin in Texas. Mm-hmm. And I'm the only gin who is featuring the native Texas junipers of Texas. So hopefully that's in our future.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
That's the main reason I wanted you here is because if you're going to make a gin, it's like what local botanicals are you using in your gin?
Right.
I know that Real Spirits is using some bottle brush in their gin, and I applaud them for that as well. But if you're just trying to make an everyday style, you're ordering in your juniper and your botanicals, and it's like, okay, you're just making another gin.
Right, with different local botanicals.
Right.
Yeah, and it occurred to me after doing all this kind of R&D and science and experimentation and world exploration. Right. I love the theme of this podcast. I know now why it's taken until me to do this, because every major city in Texas coexists with a crappy juniper to make gin. Austin is case in point, right? The ash juniper, You don't want to go in your backyard and make a gin out of that juniper.
Okay.
But yeah, so every major city in Texas coexists with a really gnarly juniper, and you don't want to make gin out of it. And so it really took some weirdo biologist to go on a hunt, and it had to be out in the mountains. So out in the West Texas region, in the counties where I forage from, a single county in West Texas that I happen to do most of my foraging in, 4 different species of junipers exist in that one county. And it's the unique climate, the unique elevation, the unique volcanic soil structure, all of those elements have promoted diversification of species.
Wow.
And so very few of us are willing to put in the 7-hour drive to go forage and figure it all out.
Right.
And that's probably why people aren't taking those extra steps to really diversify or Texify the heart of gin the way we have at WildGins.
And I feel like you need a pretty savvy and mature customer base to even understand what is gin, what are junipers. Different species of juniper will produce different tasting gins, getting people beyond the idea, what flavor is this? You know, people come in and they'll be like, what flavors of tea do you have? It's like, well, you don't go to a wine store and say, what flavors of wine do you have? It's like, what cultivars, what varietals do you have? And I think that the American market, you know, I can speak for tea, is just now getting to the level of sophistication where people can actually understand there aren't flavors. We've got 12 different green teas, and the way that they vary is who made them and where they're from, and there's no ingredients besides just green tea. So this gin we're about to drink is just juniper.
Oh, no.
Okay, there's other stuff in it.
There's other stuff in it, but this is a great segue to talk about the types of gin.
Yeah.
So this is Wild Bark. It's our West Texas dry gin. When you hear that term dry gin, that's the most typical form of gin. It refers to the London dry.
Right.
And when you hear dry, that refers to very juniper forward gin, meaning of all the botanicals that are included in either the infusion or the redistillation, there's very few of them, so it's very juniper forward. Juniper is very salient. It's very aromatic and that quote unquote piney kind of flavor to gin. We'll get to our Western style or New American style in a moment. But so yes, there's very few botanicals in this one. There's only 5 botanicals, 2 of which are juniper.
Oh.
One is the common juniper, because someday I want world domination.
Right.
And in order for me to sell in Europe, it has to have that common juniper in there.
Really?
Because remember, in Europe, they only have the common juniper that's so it's part of the definition over there.
Chumps.
No, fine by me. They're doing great. They set the path for this to all happen. So we've got the common juniper. We have the alligator juniper, also known as checkerbark. We have orris root, which is kind of a drying agent. We have coriander, and we have orange peel. So it's very bright and crisp and bold. That alligator juniper adds an extra boldness. I sometimes refer to him as my James Bond of gin, given how bold he is. I really should refer to him as my James Dean of gin, only because there was a movie made out in Marfa called Giant back in the 1950s, and it was James Dean's first appearance. It had Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor and James Dean. And a few other people, of course. But anyhow, because that's out in the lands of which I forage, I feel like I should call him my James Dean.
And Marfa has the UFO lights out there, the Marfa lights.
Yes, they
That's
do.
a really cool area
Yeah.
of Texas.
It
And
is.
apparently it's an optical illusion.
That's a whole nother
rabbit hole.
rabbit hole.
Podcast.
And it's unclear.
That's what
I'm
the
just
government wants you to think.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what the FBI wants you to think.
As a scientist, I'm going to just say no comment.
All right. Well, let's try.
So this is
gin.
really,
Break
really
some
clean
eggs.
and crisp, and it's got some nice citrus notes to it.
Yeah.
The juniper isn't overpowering. I'm not getting that piney-ness to it. I'm also not getting a bitter dryness that you do with some gins. It's almost sweet on the palate.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is. It's nice.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have, yeah, exactly like Richard just said. And I can taste that the grain alcohol is different
Yeah.
than what you'd get from just like a whatever gin you'd get.
Yeah.
I'm going to admit I don't generally like gin because all the gin I have access to in general is just whatever, like whatever, Beefeater or Bombay Sapphire or whatever, like these things that you just buy. And I've never actually liked any of those, but this is really lovely. And also for me personally, knowing the story makes it so much better for me. Like there is a lot of value for me, not just like, it actually improves my experience. So I really appreciate having the plant connection. We have a lot of different guests on this podcast, and to varying degrees, plants are part of the discussion. They're always a discussion for me because mine's just a plant. But whiskey is made from grains, but people don't always talk about that.
Right.
There's a lot of barrel talk. There's a lot of these different things, but it's really cool. This is I guess this is our first like botanical liquor, right?
We did the So Tall.
So Tall, yeah,
Yep,
So Tall.
yep,
But what's that? That's not infused or anything though. It's
it's the type of plant.
yeah,
so
it's
we
the
were talking more about the
we
plant.
talked about the plant,
Yeah.
with the plant that it's made from. But this is our first, botanical. Spirit.
And I am so tied. This is clearly my trees and this unique junipers are at the heart of Wild Gins. And we're so indebted to them that we feel very strongly about giving back. So we actually have a Give Back to the Land campaign that we call Give a Wild Buck. And we run it in the giving season from November through February, where every bottle purchased of either Wild Bark or Wild June, we give $1 to the Nature Conservancy, the West Texas chapter, to keep those lands and those trees wild. And something you mentioned earlier on that wonderful narrative about the wild teas trees in China is that there is something valuable to the wild, or not, and we all know there's value to wild plants, but there's a real extra bonus to having wild trees be at the source of your spirit. And I should give a disclaimer. I am not a botanist. I'm actually really happy about that because UT can't claw back any of my profits. I'm a fish scientist, a fish neuroethologist. So anyways, my research has nothing to do with this, but I am clearly bio-geeky enough to go find these trees. But I was listening to this wonderful audiobook, and I wish I'd refreshed the title in my head before coming here. It was either the Secret Language of Trees, I think it might have been. But they were talking about how wild trees, unlike domesticated tree farms, the tree roots talk to each other. They communicate with each other, and not only do they communicate, they help each other. So when you're walking, I'm going to bring this back to my trees. Trust me, I'm not going down this rabbit hole for no particular purpose.
Aspen is actually like a colony.
Right, that's an individual colony.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, those trees help each other. And so their roots, if someone's in need, they're actually getting benefits and nutrients from their friends. And so I love talking to my trees. I love knowing that we're collecting from trees that have friends. We're collecting from trees whose nutrients have been basically contributed to from their sisters around the hood. And they're not just on their own in this tree farm where a lot of the junipers and other botanicals in other kinds of gins are being farmed from. So.
And also it's great because it gives a reason for people who have land, people who have farms. There's a lot of construction going on right now in Texas, and it gives them a reason to keep natural products out there. We were with Brent Luby a couple of weeks ago at Desert Door, and we were talking about the pollinators, and he's created a 501c3 charity to help pollinators, and I guess that he was inspired by some of the work that you're doing as well.
We go back, and he learned the gin process, which actually uses a lot of botanicals, obviously, through our collaboration early on. But yeah, they're doing wonderful things out there with Wild Places, I believe is the name of their 501c.
Strong recommend the
The
pairing.
tea pairing.
Okay.
yes.
Strong
All right,
recommend.
all right,
Yeah, strong
okay.
recommend.
All right.
How
do you do it?
Do that, but first do the sip of the gin and then chase it with the tea.
Okay, that's how
So
you do it.
gin first, then chase it.
I've
But
never done this before. I'm excited.
it's when it works. It doesn't always work, but when it works, it's sublime, and you get things that are neither in the liquor or in the tea. When you get a really good pairing like that, you get notes, especially with something super complex like gin. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, because
Yeah.
my gin has legs, and therefore it's still sticking around
Yeah.
when this comes coating back.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
with whiskey as well as with gin, I try to open it up different ways. So sometimes a drop of water. I brought Topo Chico just in case, because that's my form of experimenting with gin. You brought some ginger beer
yeah.
and some.
You know, it's funny. I have to make this admission. I am a gin entrepreneur, gin owner, and I don't even like a gin and tonic. So when I have my gins, they are so lovely, just on ice. We don't have ice here because we're being purists, but I recommend having my gins on ice. They open up lovely. When a master distiller is putting together a gin recipe, all those botanicals are all like this. And then you add something cool, like cool water, and they open up.
We've got that. I've got water here, so if you want to put a drop of water, just let me know, and I'll.
Well, I know how my gins open up. It's up to you boys. But nonetheless, I think it's funny, or I feel like I have to explain myself why I don't like a gin and tonic. And I think it's also important to inform folks who may not know about gin, maybe have been put off from gin because they tried a gin and tonic and didn't like it.
Right.
Now, a real quick an aside to describe the origins of the gin and tonic came about when the British soldiers were building a bridge, I believe in India, where there was a lot of malaria, and so the doctors gave them a daily dose of quinine, which is the the substance in tonic, and they had to have that tonic every day.
Yeah.
So the British soldiers added gin to their tonic to make the tonic taste better, not the other way around.
Right.
So the Brits have just used this as a cultural, convention going forward, but the rest of us don't have to have a gin and tonic. In fact, I think, and we were talking about this earlier, that tonic squashes and masks the beauty of a gin.
Right.
So I like my gin on ice. I like it in lots of different ways. This guy makes a great mule. When you make a mule, typically, it's ginger beer. Classically, it's with a vodka. And then because it's a vodka, you have to add something because vodka's tasteless, so they add a lime. Forget the lime. Just go with wild bark and my a really high quality ginger beer. I like Fever Tree. On ice, forget the lime, it detracts. If you want a garnish to make it look pretty, use a mint leaf. Who knows, maybe a tea leaf would be a really nice thing. You were talking about, both of you were talking about the sweetness that hit you when you tried my gin.
Right.
Well, during COVID, we all had our COVID projects.
Yeah.
My COVID project was going down deep on the medicinal properties of juniper. And it ends up that juniper has 2 antiviral compounds, and the only way you're going to get at them is through really lengthy extractions.
Oh.
What was COVID? I had a whole lot of time, had a whole lot of juniper berries, had a whole lot of alcohol. So I did a lengthy extraction and then created an antiviral cocktail enhancer that we used to give away for free, and it's so intensive I don't do it anymore.
Right.
But the sweetness that would come out of that, that alligator juniper after a lengthy extraction was incredible. It had almost tea-like qualities, and it was sweet. And it made me realize there are some bound up, deeply bound sugars in this juniper that requires extraction to pull out. So we're getting a hint of that with the gin, but
I'm gonna go ahead and I like the idea of doing the mix. I'm gonna go ahead and give us all a little bit of tea in our cups to let it cool.
Okay.
And then we can add a little of this gin to it because I think it is going to be really good. And I like the idea of actually tea and spirits are bad 9 times out of 10, but the 1 time out of 10 they're good, they're really good, and I think this one might be really good.
In the distillation process, a lot of people seem to think that distillation is as a concentration of flavors and that it's just going to make something more intense. I've found that it actually brings out different flavors.
Right.
You're getting a lot more of those volatile oils and essences that are coming from those different grains, different botanicals. Those are what seems to come more to the forefront.
You're absolutely correct. You're separating out those separate individual volatile compounds. And depending on where you cut it and where your plates are, you're
Right.
going to get different elements of those. But yes, it actually allows the separate components to shine more brightly or be blended more distinctly. And yes, so distillation, you're 100% correct. It is not a concentration. It's a separation and shine
Right.
on those different compounds.
Yeah, it's fun because the more you get into the process and you just think you boil it off and capture the vapors and that's pretty well it. But there are different things happening at different temperature levels. So
Right.
that fractional distillation, it even goes to working with diesel fuel and separating the different grades of gasoline. It's essentially what we're doing is we're trying to find the parts that we like on that column. That column has copper plates in there that are called bubble plates, and those bubble plates create more layers of evaporation and redistillation, essentially. So you get a lot more flavors, and then each one of those plates is going to give you a different type of flavor. So capturing the right things at the right temperatures is a little bit more of the art to that craft. Yeah.
And that's not my art or science. I leave it to the true master distillers to do that work. So some people assume I'm the distiller. I'm like, oh, no. I have the fun job. I go out to the mountains. I forage for these junipers. I talk to my trees. I thank them for giving me their berries. But I let the true, that's an art and a science to do distillation. So I do not wear that cap.
So the college is letting out, and Sam, your partner associate, he was mentioning that you were going away on sabbatical. Where are you going for the summer?
Oh, we do not call this summer a sabbatical. That's a very distinct other thing. Actually, so at UT, it's a big Research One university. And so when you have that going on, we're expected to do a lot of research. The summer is actually when we get a lot of research done because we're not doing our teaching and having our schedules broken up in a variety of ways. I actually have 4.5, I call them half because I'm only co-advising the half, graduate students. So these are students who are earning their PhD in my laboratory. I also have a postdoc. That's after they have their PhD and we're collaborating on research together.
Okay.
And so during the summer, we are getting down and doing the science that needs to get done. Fortunately for me, since COVID, I can actually set up meetings and kind of advise and guide their science from afar. And that's fortunate for me in terms of my personal life. I have parents who are on the elderly side that would really need it's good that I can go visit them. So since COVID, I've been going up to Wisconsin in the early part of the summer to spend time with my parents, which is really great. Then I zoom away with my graduate students, every week to keep the science going and alive, and they get to put their blinders up so they can just focus and do the science, and it's super fun.
Main reason we're doing this is also post-COVID and bringing people back together and having conversations in person. It's sort of like a lost art. Having conversations again. A lot of people, they sequestered themselves and went on Zooms, and I tried to avoid Zooms at all possible, but now work is sort of bringing me back into the Zoom world. But in terms of doing that as a way of interacting, I'm bristling against it.
Yeah, well, I personally am trying to, make lemonade out of the lemons of COVID, and allowing me to do just the essential Zooms to keep science going while I can attend to, personal life needs like taking care of my parents. I have a husband in Colorado, so I visit him also later in the summer. Good time to be outside of Austin.
Absolutely.
And so it's, there's some benefits as opposed to just being tied to your desk, and it allows for more creativity. I certainly hope at some point in the fall when I go foraging, I can be Zooming with my graduate students on if I happen to spill over from the weekend into a Monday, be like, hey, Monday morning Zoom from the mountains. That would be fun.
Did you want to do a new tea with the?
Well, I want to do a
gin?
mix first.
You wanna
I want to actually do the
Gin and-
mix
gin and tea?
first. Yeah.
Okay.
Here, let me.
I had some tea in my gin,
All right, here you go.
and it was a really
Don't
good
drink
pairing.
this yet.
It was a really good
Okay.
pairing.
Will you do the
Pour 'em.
honors? I literally don't know how much to put, but just put
I wouldn't put a lot. You just want a little bit. You don't need to. We don't need to get drunk on this podcast. It is not 5 o'clock.
My tolerance is way up though because I was just in China. I actually don't drink alcohol personally in my personal life at all. When I'm in America, the only time that I ever drink even a sip of alcohol is on this show. I don't drink beer. I don't drink at home. I don't go to bars. I'm basically a teetotaler except doing this podcast, unless I'm in China where I'm almost an alcoholic because it's part of the culture. And when I go and meet with these tea farmers, Hungy doesn't drink, but a lot of the tea farmers, that's what you do is you just get pretty much blackout drunk with them. So that's part of my job when I'm there. But yeah, cheers.
Chin chin.
Chin chin.
Yeah, that goes good. That's really good.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You get a lychee.
Oh, I love this.
Like a lychee note in there that comes. I was tasting it when I did the chaser, but you really get that that, and I don't get it in the gin by itself, and I don't get it in the tea by itself.
Right.
But it's
It's a
a very
synergy.
distinct lychee note. That's when it works. When I say 9 times out of 10 it doesn't work, but 1 time out of 10 it works. That's what I mean. Is when you get something really nice coming out of the combination that's not present in either thing.
You're like what you were saying earlier with tea and what is tea or gin and what is gin. There's a lot of education that has to happen because people are coming from different various levels. Like you were saying before, you hear of gin, you think of Beefeater, you think of Tanqueray. You've got in your mind as a novice, these are gin. And there are hundreds of them out there. There was a gin explosion, and to the point where people are saying, well, now gin is on a decline. And
No.
it's really bizarre the way people think of categories, and they lump everybody under the same umbrella. So you can have, it's like, okay, whiskey had its time to shine, now we're doing mezcal. And it's like, it's mezcal's day in the sunshine. And, but inside of those categories, there are different brands that are doing better than the others. There are some that are on an upswing, and there are some that are on, on a downswing. And if you know that, it's a little bit strange having those conversations in the liquor store.
Yeah, no, gin is actually on the rise, particularly in America. And it's who are the people leading that charge are the mixologists behind the bar. They recognize that vodka's kind of tasteless. So why
By definition, in
by
fact.
definition. So why start there when you can start with something far more interesting? And so a lot of them are starting here.
Yeah.
And going back to the synergy of this beautiful drink you made, actually there's a real synergy and parallelism between the origins of tea and gin. Both are medicinal.
Absolutely.
Both come from
Absolutely.
plants with these different
Yep.
medicinal properties,
Yep.
and that was their motivation. That was their chi, so
Yep,
to speak.
yep.
It was the energy they were bringing, and what the consequence that you were how you're supposed to feel
Right.
afterwards.
Yep.
So this makes more sense than you would initially imagine.
Yeah. Also, I would never mix a green tea with a whiskey or a rum or any dark liquor.
Right.
Or vodka. I don't personally like vodka because, like you said, it doesn't actually taste like anything, just like alcohol. But this is so nice because this is a very subtle tea.
Yes.
It's a very good tea, but it's a very subtle tea, and I would never mix it with anything besides something like this because it's a really balanced gin, and it really brings out. You can really taste the tea with the gin. It doesn't overpower it, which is really remarkable for a tea like this.
Yeah.
To be able to pair with something.
I would love to recommend this as a great summer drink.
Yeah.
You know, like create beautiful tea from you, and then cool it down. Add a little bit of wild bark. We haven't even gotten to wild gin yet, but wild bark, and maybe have it with ice.
Cold,
be a-
yeah,
Okay.
cold.
And then you could have quantity, medicinal effects. You could like sip it over a nice hot afternoon. I mean, yummy.
This is a really good one. I've put in the time doing the research. Me and my business partner Nate have really put in the time doing the research. We spent a whole summer just going through different tea spirit combinations, and this is definitely a really outstanding one. So I'm definitely going to experiment a little more with this over the
Yes.
summer, I think.
I like it.
So American style gin.
Yes. Okay. Are we ready to move on to Miss Wild June?
Yeah, let's see a little. What is the difference?
What is the difference exactly?
Wait, real quick,
yes.
I want to go ahead and get my water hot and just interrupt our podcast with the sound of water boiling real quick before we move on so I can get a fresh tea in here.
So what is American style gin, and what kind of tea have you brought out to pair with it?
Me first, I guess.
Sure.
First part of that question. So American style, new American style, or Western style gin is, in contrast to a dry gin, has many more botanicals. So the juniper is not as forward. You may have heard of Monkey 47. Monkey 47 hails out of Germany, and the 47 refers to 47 botanicals.
Oh, wow.
Which is a little bit over the top. Not sure if anyone can differentiate the 45th from the 46th.
Right.
However, there are lots of great gin, and Monkey 47 is a lovely gin. In fact, some people have thought that Miss Wild June is a lot like that. The Botanist has 31 botanicals. There are lots of gins that have many more botanicals to it. And so the juniper, I wouldn't say gets lost. It's not just as salient. So, and these are often much more complex.
The Botanist is a gin made by whiskey makers from Scotland.
There you go.
Yeah.
So when I was out hunting for the Alligator Juniper in the Davis Mountains, I came across a tree that had juniper qualities to it, but the berries were red. I was like scratching my head. This is very unusual. By this time, I'm driving around with tree books, and I end up keying out this unique tree, and it ended up being a very rare juniper called the Red Berry Juniper.
Whoa, I love rare stuff.
Yes, doesn't live in any other state except in Texas, and in Texas it lives only in West Texas in the Panhandle. At certain elevations and certain soils. And it came up through Mexico and went west in the cattle drives a couple hundred years ago, and it thrives out there. And so I, went ahead before I even knew it was non-toxic, and of course tasted it, and it was sweet. I, of course, also took note to what the animals around me were doing, and these berries were found in lots of the scat in the local area, telling me it was a very delicious, yummy nutrient in the area. So anyhow, this Red Berry Juniper, my Miss Wild June is feminine. She's complicated and sweet, hence the feminine pronoun. The Red Berry Juniper had such sweet tones that we paired her with the common juniper, that more aromatic, traditional, piney juniper. So we essentially have the yin and the yang of the juniper world complemented together. And then we added 9 other botanicals, angelica root, orris root, a fair number of citrus, orange, and lemon peel, hops, which is typically in beer, white pepper, and a note that really is a nice warming note, cinnamon. So she's complex, and I often refer to her as my gateway gin, because
Wow,
people...
I get rose petals.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you
Definitely
didn't
smell
even
the cinnamon.
mention rose or florals.
Okay. Well, to pair with this very, very complex and sweet gin, I picked an Oolong, which are the most complex teas.
Okay.
They're cultivar specific, unlike a lot of other teas that can be made from seed propagated plants that are genetically diverse. This is a clonal cultivar. This is called needle on the seafloor, Haidi Laojian. And the phrase to dredge a needle from the seafloor is Chinese for find a needle in a haystack. And so it's a reference to something that's very, very rare. So it kind of has a little bit in common with this Red Berry Juniper. And this is made by a guy named Oolong. I was also just with him in China recently, and he's a 4th generation tea master in Chaozhou in the Phoenix Mountains in China. And this is, yeah, here, I'll let the people see this guy. Yeah, there we go. You can give it a little smell. It's not going to have much of a fragrance until we heat it up.
Very subtle.
Yeah, very subtle. And then when we go ahead and give it a rinse, I'm using my Phoenix Oolong teapot. This is an unglazed stoneware pot that's dedicated to this particular style of tea, the Phoenix Oolongs. And the Phoenix refers to the Phoenix Mountains where they're from. So there's 4 different places where oolongs can be from. You've got Phoenix oolongs, Wuyi oolongs, Taiwanese oolongs, and Anxi oolongs. And this is the Phoenix Mountains in eastern Guangdong province, the only oolong producing region in Guangdong. The rest are in Fujian or Taiwan. This one I'm going to set the first steeping aside, and we're going to drink it at the end. Actually, we can use this for our mix if we decide to mix again, because it'll be cool by then.
What a color.
Yeah, beautiful rosy blush to this tea. The Phoenix oolongs will have this, really lovely blush to them. And then now, you'll definitely be able to smell this tea.
Yeah. Really different from the last one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is roasted with charcoal, so you're going to get a little bit of that charcoal. But a good tea master, when they roast with charcoal, they don't want the tea to taste like charcoal. They're just trying to dry the tea and get that roast there to just enough bring out the innate character of the tea. And Oolong, he's, like I said, he's 4th generation. He has been doing this his whole life, and so he is a very, very skilled tea master and has really got a nice light touch when it comes to charcoal roasting. So we'll go ahead and drink some of this guy, and I'm very excited. I'm really excited for the pairing because the last one went so well. And there's a huge, oolongs probably have the most in common with gin insofar as they're super, super complex. And gin being this like multi-plant botanical infusion has a lot of complexity to it as well.
I'm so glad to be back at the tea house with you, Sohan.
Yeah, the new tea house. Yeah, I'm glad to be back too. And it's the new tea house for those of you who didn't catch that. We're in a new tea house. We're open on 1715 East 7th. This is the new tea house we've been working on this whole time. And so, cheers to being back here. Cheers.
Chin.
Don't be afraid to slurp. Yeah, slurping is your friend. And then exhaling through the nose after you swallow is where you get.
I like this. Yeah. Might not be doing the technique right, but I love the tea.
No, you're doing it right. Yeah, you're doing it right.
Exactly what we do in whiskey: the slurping, aerates, the breathing out, holding your mouth open while you're breathing in.
Yeah, this is a nice one, and you can feel the tea is very different on this tea than the last one. Like immediately, you get a different vibe from this tea.
I like it.
All right. Well, I'm very excited to meet Miss.
I think complex meets
Wild
complex.
June. Yeah.
Makes greatness.
Drama. But good drama.
Yeah, I didn't say she was drama free.
When I'm walking through the spirits aisles and I'm looking at bottles, it always brings me to people. It's the same thing. This is what I love about what Sohan is doing with his teas. His teas are tied to people.
Oh yeah. This is so nice. This is so very complex, but also very balanced. It's like a whole tapestry.
She unfolds in different waves.
Yeah. Get the cinnamon for sure.
Yeah, what I like about Miss Wild June is her complexity lends itself to the different seasons in different ways. So her sweetness makes for beautiful cocktails in the summer. You can imagine pairing her with watermelon and mint and cucumber and Topo Chico. I mean, just super light, refreshing, little bit of fresh fruit and her boing. And yet the cinnamon in the fall and winter, she's a warming side.
Right.
So you can make a beautiful hot toddy with her. You know, that cinnamon is a lovely touch. So,
Yeah, the cinnamon is on the nose, and then when you taste her, then you get that juniper, and I love the juniperness and the distinctive characters of the junipers. I'm really here for that. So it's really cool getting to taste that red berry juniper versus the alligator
oh yeah,
juniper.
completely different personalities.
Very different, and it is more feminine. I really appreciate that you're a scientist, but you're also willing to be very spiritual about the plants and personify them, personify the gym.
Absolutely.
I'm like that too. I think that anyone who is a real scientist is not going to hesitate to engage with that spiritual aspect of the natural world, because there's literally no conflict at all between
Agreed.
science and that spiritual component.
Absolutely. If you're interested in the mystery, science and spirituality are both about that.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that there's a lot of misguided lay people think that they're somehow at odds, and I think that's a very reductive.
I'm really glad you're bringing this up and I don't have to. I've always believed that those were complementary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm still getting a rose floral quality there. The juniper is bright. It's not bitter, and the sweetness is there as well on the palate. It coats well.
Yeah. No, she's something special. And if you're trying to, we all need aids to help remember things. If you need a mnemonic device to understand, wait, which juniper is in which gin? The wild June having that red star is your kind of clue that she's the one carrying the red berry juniper. So.
And so the juniper berries, the ash juniper berries that we see here are blue.
Yes.
And what are the alligator juniper berries like?
They are this beautiful, it's probably hard to see way back there, but they're kind of a minty green.
Okay.
And actually when they get overripe, they turn purple. It's really fascinating. The mintiness of this green is a combination of the green undertones and then a white bloom on top of the berry. Some people might know what a bloom is. A bloom is typically a yeast film outside of a fruit. And some blooms have psychotropic properties. Back in Caesar's day, Julius Caesar, when he was invading the UK, well, it wasn't the UK back then, but the British Isles, and was going up to invade Scotland. And this is back when the Picts, the really short native people of Scotland actually still existed. And they had a bloom on the heather that would turn into like this amazing mead with super duper psychotropic properties, and they've lost the recipe. But anyhow, that bloom is not in my gin. That's a long story, but I try to clean my berries in a very chemically minimal, I don't use chemicals way to take the bloom off. If I keep a bloom on, a couple things are gonna happen. You're gonna mix with the recipe itself. Those berries are going to spoil. So I clean my berries and dehydrate them to get the dry essence of them before using them.
So the wild part of Texas, maybe you have more information, but I hear that the cedars can be invasive, but there is a certain harmony between oak trees and cedar trees, and there's a cycle that can happen. Do you know anything about that?
I know less about that particular cycle, but what I have noticed in where I forage, there's strong plant associations, which I just love. So underneath an alligator juniper, there's often a yucca very nearby. The red berry juniper, there's certain types of plants, and right now that I haven't, full admission, have not looked up what they are, but I recognize them. There's certain insects that I always see on the red berry juniper. The scarab beetles, specifically the Gloriosa scarab beetles, are always on my alligator juniper. And I just love those associations and those links between nature and either within kind of a category of plants or between big life forms and how they work together.
It is a symbiotic relationship. So if you just went out and got rid of all of the junipers in your area, you would actually affect the entire ecosystem.
Yes, and you know, junipers are water hogs, so a lot of people don't like junipers because they just, you know, suck down, draw up a lot of the water. But out in the mountains, they actually give something back. And the terpenes, some of the biological aromatics found in junipers, actually can seed clouds.
What?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's a neat way where it's creates its own little ecosystem giving back to that land. And to me, that makes sense because when I go to the Davis Mountains, it's essentially the epicenter of alligator juniper. It's so green, a richer green than, let's say, when you go down to other areas near there, like the Big Bend area. And I have to think there might be something to this, that the junipers that are so prevalent up there are helping kind of seed a little microclimate, bringing some extra water in.
Wow.
So these terpenes are vaporizing and they're getting all the way up to the clouds?
That's the idea. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. I had never thought
I mean, when
about
you're
that.
out there and you smell trees, that smell, those compounds, those aromatics hanging out, they're not just sitting locally,
Sure.
they're drifting upward.
That's wild. That's
Yeah.
really cool. I've
It's
never heard about that before.
It's a very neat feature.
They say that the sound of the birds wake up the trees.
Oh, I like
says
that.
Yeah, in the
Canadian
morning.
proverb?
Yeah, it's just I don't know whether it's one of those causation equals correlation type of events, but people say that when the birds start singing in the morning, that the trees start opening up their leaves and the water starts flowing. The world becomes alive.
I like that spiritual narration for
Yeah.
as a science, I would just say that's a correlation.
You could test it though, you know,
I
play
could.
some recordings of birdsong in the middle of the night.
I could. And I would be welcome to find a positive association there. But
So where do people find your gin?
thank you for asking that question, Richard. So if you're in Texas, you can find our gins at most, if not all, Total Wines across the state. In the Austin area, we're getting in nearly every retail liquor store that you have. We're not yet in Twins, but I'm emphasizing the yet. And if you're outside of Texas, or if you're a Texan gone for the summer, kind of like me having to head up to Wisconsin for a little bit, you can order our gins online. Oh. So all you have to do is go to our website, wildgins.com, and it's really simple to, our products, and you can order away. And if you're enthusiastic and order 4 bottles at a time, we cover the shipping.
Okay.
Hey.
Hello.
Love that. Love the free
You
shipping.
can never have too many bottles of Wild Gins on your shelves.
No.
I know price points vary from store to store, and there are different deals between different stores. But generally, what is the price point?
Right. You can see this on a shelf anywhere from $32 to $36 a bottle. And for given the amount of premium craft that's in each of these bottles, I think that is an amazing deal. I priced these purposefully so that they would be accessible to almost everyone walking into a liquor store, even though the quality and the craft deserves, that higher end price. I'm happy to drive out to the mountains on me as long as people buy my gins.
How you consume it? I think you said that you like it on ice. Is there anything that particular goes with one gin over another?
Thank you for asking that as well. Both make an amazing martini. Skip the vermouth, just shaken up on ice. I like a little lemon twist. This one makes Mr. Wild Bark. If you have to do a gin and tonic, if you're addicted to those, I'm not going to get in your way. In fact, I would recommend Mr. Wild Bark. He makes an amazing mule with a ginger beer over ice with Wild Bark. Makes a great Last Word, which is a very fancy gin cocktail. I invite you to look it up. Makes a great gin mojito. A gin mojito is a south side, so a lot of mint and lime and yumminess. Miss Wild June, lots of fresh fruit, you can take watermelon, mint, Topo Chico, and Wild June with her. I call that a wild watermelon. We love a certain summer or hot weather treat called a West Texas spring water. Wild June, cucumber, mint, Topo Chico, yummy. She makes a great gimlet. That's a classic gin cocktail.
Okay.
If you're in a fix, don't want to be fancy, just are at the store, want something quick to mix with her, when you add pink sparkling grapefruit juice with her, I call it a wild and pink. I was just at kind of a racket club, served this to all the wet, sweaty
Right.
racket players, and they're like, this is so refreshing. So be creative, and we're about to do that right now with some amazing tea.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. I'm gonna try and save a little bit for Mr. Nate too, since he's back here. But I'm gonna cool this guy down a little bit. This is our Hui Wei Bei, the returning flavor cup, meaning it's the first steeping of this tea that we've been drinking, which is called Needle on the Seafloor. The Phoenix Oolong called Needle on the Seafloor. Just try and get this down to temp, and then do a little bit of just a dash here. You got gin in there?
Nope.
You got to remedy that.
Yeah, there we go.
She's too good. Note to everyone watching. Irresistible.
Okay, this is a little warmer than the last one, but it should still be pretty good. All right, I'm excited. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, I love her on the nose.
Yeah. Yeah, you get like a fruitiness. What is that
Yeah,
fruit?
with the earth coming in. Yeah, what is that fruit?
What
Is
is
it
that
the red
fruit?
berry, or is it some interesting interaction?
Raspberry?
Raspberry is so distinctive. I feel.
Yeah.
Wow, maybe that tea brings out the red berry.
It definitely tastes like a berry. Yeah, maybe.
There's
that's
only
it.
one berry in my, there's two berries, the common and the red, and the common definitely does not taste like that.
So Molly is on a little bit of a time crunch. So Han, it's so great to be back here. Where do they find your tea? And remind us again which teas we drank today.
We had Wild Sparrow, which is almost gone. I literally muled that back in my luggage. He only made like 4 kilos, period, this whole year. We brought back 1.5 kilos. So hopefully there's still some by the time people watch this. But that's my favorite tea in the tea house right now is that green tea we just drank. This is Needle on the Seafloor, Phoenix Oolong. You can get them at westchinatea.com. You can follow us at West China Tea on Instagram and TikTok. Our YouTube channel is Tea House Ghost, where we have a lot of instructional information and a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today, the really nerdy, science stuff. We get deeper into that there. And then definitely come visit us at our new tea house here at 1715 East 7th, just across from Houston Tillotson University. Chalmers is there, Chacon is there, 7th and Chacon, basically. We're open till 11 p.m. Friday through Sunday, 11 to 11 right now. And then we're adding Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 6 to 10 p.m. We are a late night tea house. We had 2 full tables at close last night.
Nice.
So it was a vibe. It was jumping. So yeah, come visit us. Definitely come visit us.
Yeah, it's so great, Molly, that you're here. I've been trying to get you to come on the show for a year now, and it's great that the stars aligned, and I was able to introduce your gin to my good friend Sohan here, and that's the purpose of this show, is to bring in world spirits, bring in people, bring in conversation, and have fun with spirits and teas. So we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. So grateful to you both. Thank you.
Cheers.